Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about a very important strait. Every day we always hear about the Strait of Hormuz, but this one is located very close to it. Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the hidden gateway behind oil, global trade, and billions in savings. Every day, giant ships loaded with oil, fuel, food, cars, electronics, machinery, and raw materials move across the oceans as if the global system is permanent and unstoppable. From a distance, world trade looks smooth. It looks automatic. It looks like goods simply travel from one country to another without interruption. But the truth is very different. The global economy depends on a small number of narrow passages where huge amounts of trade are forced through tight spaces. And one of the most important of them all is a place many people rarely hear about, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. This is not a giant ocean. It is not a vast sea. It is a narrow maritime gate between Yemen on one side and Djibouti and Eritrea on the other. At its narrowest point, it is only about 20 miles, or roughly 32 kilometers across. That is all. And yet the slim strip of water helps connect the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden and the wider Indian Ocean, making it one of the most critical trade passages on Earth. Its name is often translated as the Gate of Tears. That name sounds dramatic, and for good reason. For centuries, the strait was feared by sailors because of difficult currents, hazards, and the danger of moving through a tight, unforgiving channel. Even in the modern age of satellites, tracking systems, and advanced navigation, the name still feels appropriate. This is still a place where geography can shape economics, politics, war, and the price of moving goods across the planet. And that is what makes Bab el-Mandeb so fascinating. Because this is not just a story about a location on a map. It is a story about history, oil, shipping, alternative routes, and money. It is a story about why one narrow strait can save the world enormous amounts of time and operating cost when it is functioning normally, and why the damage can be measured in billions of dollars when that route becomes unsafe or unstable. So in this video, we are going to answer 4 major questions. What is the historical importance of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait? Why is it so vital for oil and global shipping? What alternatives exist when ships avoid it? And how much money does the world save when this route works the way it is supposed to? To understand that, we have to go back in time. Long before the modern oil trade, long before giant tankers, long before container ships stacked with thousands of boxes, Bab el-Mandeb already mattered. It stood at a crossroads linking Arabia, East Africa, the Red Sea, and the wider waters leading toward India and Asia. Ancient trade routes, maritime exchange, and regional power all passed through or depended on this corridor. Whoever could influence this gate had influence over movement. And whoever controlled movement often controlled wealth. But the real turning point came in 1869 with the opening of the Suez Canal. That was the moment Bab el-Mandeb became something far bigger than a regional trade passage. Once the Suez Canal connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, the southern entrance to that route became just as important as the canal itself. In practical terms, Bab el-Mandeb became the southern doorway into one of the shortest and most valuable trade links in the world. That changed global shipping forever. Before that connection, ships moving between Europe and Asia often had to travel around the southern tip of Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope. That route worked, but it was longer, slower, and much more expensive. After 1869, ships could go through the Mediterranean, down the Suez Canal, through the Red Sea, and out through Bab el-Mandeb into the Indian Ocean. That shorter route meant less distance. Less distance meant less time. Less time meant less fuel. And less fuel meant less cost. That basic economic logic is why the strait still matters so much today. In the modern world, Bab el-Mandeb is one of the great arteries of energy trade. Huge volumes of crude oil, refined petroleum products, and other cargoes move through this passage as ships travel between the Gulf region, Europe, Asia, and beyond. When traffic moves normally through Bab el-Mandeb and up through the Red Sea toward Suez, shipping companies gain a major cost advantage. But when that route becomes dangerous, the world feels it. That is exactly what has happened in recent years. At one point, the volume of crude oil and oil products moving through Bab el-Mandeb fell by more than 50% compared with the previous year. That is not a minor disruption. That is a major shock to a vital maritime corridor. And the damage was not limited to oil. Trade through the broader Red Sea and Suez system dropped sharply as well. In one period, traffic through the Suez Canal fell by about 50% compared with the year before. Tonnage moving across the Gulf of Aden dropped by 76%. Tonnage passing through the Suez Canal fell by 70%. Meanwhile, ship arrivals around the Cape of Good Hope surged by 89%. Those numbers tell a powerful story. When the Bab el-Mandeb route becomes risky, trade does not disappear. It reroutes. And the main alternative is the long journey around Africa. Instead of heading into the Red Sea through Bab el-Mandeb, ships continue south, sail down the east coast of Africa, round the Cape of Good Hope, and then head back north toward Europe or the Atlantic world. That keeps trade moving, but it comes at a price, a very large price. For many vessels, that rerouting adds major distance to the journey. Travel distances for ships that would normally pass through the Red Sea increased by around 48% for cargo vessels and around 38% for tankers. Travel times also jumped by as much as 45% for cargo ships and 28% for tankers. That means more days at sea. More days means more fuel burned. More fuel means higher voyage cost. And there is another layer people often overlook. The ship itself becomes less productive. If a vessel is tied up on a longer journey, it cannot start its next trip as quickly. That means fewer voyages per year, lower fleet efficiency, and tighter shipping capacity across the market. One estimate suggested that a return to shorter Red Sea routes could free up around 6% to 7% of global container shipping capacity. That is a huge number. It means the value of Bab el-Mandeb is not only about saving cash on a single trip. It is also about allowing the global shipping system to function more efficiently as a whole. So when people ask how this strait saves money, the answer is not based on a single fee or a single invoice. The savings come from multiple directions at once. First, there is distance savings. A shorter route cuts thousands of unnecessary miles from many journeys. Second, there is time savings. Ships using the Red Sea route often avoid an extra 10 to 15 days, and in some cases 10 to 20 days, compared with the long detour around Africa. Third, there is fuel savings. A shorter voyage burns less bunker fuel, which is one of the largest operating costs in maritime transport. Fourth, there is fleet productivity savings. A ship that completes a trip faster can return to service faster, helping carriers move more cargo with the same fleet. And fifth, there are indirect savings. Lower schedule disruption, lower pressure on freight rates, lower inventory delays, and in some cases lower insurance and risk costs than would exist during a crisis-driven detour. To see how fast those costs build up, consider a typical large container vessel on the Far East Europe route. Sending that ship around Africa instead of through the Red Sea and Suez can add roughly $400,000 in extra cost for just one voyage. One ship, one rerouting decision, roughly $400,000 gone. Now multiply that across many vessels, over many weeks, across multiple shipping companies, and the financial significance becomes obvious. This is why Bab el-Mandeb is not just a body of water. It is a cost-saving mechanism built into the map of the world. But what happens when the route becomes too dangerous and carriers want alternatives? The most obvious alternative is still the Cape of Good Hope route. It is the main backup path for ships avoiding the Red Sea. But beyond that, there are also partial land-based and infrastructure-based alternatives, especially for oil. One important example is Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline system. This allows crude oil to move from the Gulf side of the kingdom across land to the Red Sea coast, where it can be loaded at Yanbu. At one point, exports from Yanbu were expected to reach about 3.8 million barrels per day in March, and the broader pipeline system has a capacity of up to 7 million barrels per day, although not all of that is available for export because part of the system also supports domestic refining needs. That matters because pipelines can reduce pressure on vulnerable sea routes. But they are not perfect replacements. They are only part of the answer. The oil may move across land, but ships are still needed afterward. And not every producer has access to that kind of infrastructure. Some countries have tighter limits, fewer alternatives, or more complicated export options. So while pipelines help, they do not remove the strategic importance of Bab el-Mandeb. Another supporting alternative is Egypt's broader transport and pipeline infrastructure, which can help move some energy northward. But again, it works within the same general Red Sea-Mediterranean system. It does not erase the importance of the southern entrance. That is the key point. There is no single replacement for Bab el-Mandeb that offers the same combination of speed, scale, flexibility, and cost efficiency. Yes, ships can go around Africa. Yes, pipelines can shift part of the load. Yes, operators can adapt. But every substitute comes with trade-offs. Longer distance, more time, higher fuel burn, lower fleet productivity, more logistical complexity, more cost. So what exists right now? The current picture is mixed. Some energy shipments and selected trade flows still move through the Red Sea corridor. Some operators continue to use the route when they judge the risks to be manageable. At the same time, many major shipping lines have chosen to divert vessels around the Cape of Good Hope whenever regional tensions rise or uncertainty increases. So the system is not simply open or closed. It is uneven. It is selective. It is unstable. Some traffic continues. Some traffic avoids the area. And the decision depends on cargo type, security conditions, insurance considerations, naval protection, and the risk tolerance of individual companies. That is why the current reality can look confusing from the outside. A person might hear that oil exports from a Red Sea terminal are rising, yet also hear that many big container lines are still diverting away from Bab el-Mandeb and Suez. Both can be true at the same time. In one period, Red Sea oil exports from Yanbu were set to rise to a record 3.8 million barrels per day, showing that parts of the energy system were still functioning strongly. At the same time, large carriers were still rerouting some services around Africa because the overall environment remained too uncertain. That is how modern trade often works during a crisis. It does not switch neatly from on to off. It becomes fragmented. And fragmentation is expensive. The economic pain is especially visible in places that depend heavily on normal Red Sea and Suez traffic. One clear example is Egypt. During disruption, monthly losses connected to Suez Canal revenue were estimated at around $800 million per month. Over the course of 2024, losses reached about $7 billion. Annual canal revenue fell to roughly $4 billion, down sharply from previous record levels. That is just the direct revenue side. It does not fully capture the global cost of longer shipping routes, higher freight bills, additional fuel use, delivery delays, insurance surcharges, and tighter vessel availability. So when we ask how much money Bab el-Mandeb saves, the answer is larger than any single number. It saves money every day the route stays usable. It saves money by preventing detours. It saves money by shortening voyages. It saves money by reducing fuel consumption. It saves money by protecting fleet efficiency. It saves money by supporting smoother scheduling. And it saves money by helping keep global trade moving through one of the shortest maritime links between Asia and Europe. In other words, Bab el-Mandeb does not create value because it is wide, comfortable, or easy. It creates value because it removes enormous amounts of wasted cost from the global system. And that is why this narrow passage matters so much. On a map, it looks small. In reality, it influences oil flows, shipping choices, national revenue, freight capacity, and the economics of global trade itself. It is where geography becomes money. It is where a few miles of water can affect billions of dollars. It is where ancient trade history meets modern supply chains. And it is where the hidden architecture of globalization becomes visible. Because the modern world may seem digital, fast, and advanced, but it still depends on physical choke points. It still depends on narrow waterways. It still depends on whether ships can move safely through a handful of crucial passages. Bab el-Mandeb is one of those passages. One of the most important, one of the most sensitive, and one of the most expensive to lose. So the next time you hear about shipping delays, rising transport costs, energy route risks, or turmoil in the Red Sea region, remember this. Behind those headlines is a strait only 20 miles wide, a gateway tied to the Suez Canal since 1869, a corridor that has seen traffic drops of 50%, 70%, and 76%, rerouting surges of 89%, distance increases of 48% and 38%, travel time increases of 45% and 28%, added voyage costs of $400,000, potential capacity relief of 6% to 7%, pipeline flows of 3.8 million barrels per day, pipeline capacity of 7 million barrels per day, monthly revenue pain of $800 million, annual losses of $7 billion, and canal revenue falling to around $4 billion. That is not a minor regional waterway. That is one of the hinges of the global economy. And that is why the Bab el-Mandeb Strait matters far more than most people realize.